Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are exploring one of Oscar Wilde's most meaningful short stories, The Devoted Friend. In this lesson, we will first understand the story summary and then analyze it using the key elements of prose. This story may look simple, almost like a fairy tale, but inside, it carries a powerful lesson about friendship, kindness, and selfishness. Let's begin with the story itself. Little Hans is a poor but gentle gardener who lives alone in a small cottage near his garden. He works hard, loves nature, and finds happiness in simple things. Hans is kind by nature and always ready to help others, even when it costs him his own comfort. His closest companion is Hugh the miller, a wealthy man who constantly speaks about friendship and morality. The miller praises himself as a true friend, but his actions tell a very different story. Throughout the year, the miller takes flowers, herbs, tools, and labor from Hans. In return, he promises to give Hans an old wheelbarrow, a promise that is always delayed, never fulfilled. Hans, innocent and trusting, never questions him. One stormy night, the miller sends Hans to fetch a doctor for his injured son. He refuses to lend Hans a lantern, fearing it might get damaged. Alone in the darkness and heavy rain, Hans loses his way and drowns. Even after Hans's tragic death, the miller shows no true sorrow. Instead, he complains about losing the wheelbarrow he had promised. The story ends with deep irony and leaves the reader disturbed and thoughtful. The Devoted Friend is a short story written in simple, fairy tale-like prose by Oscar Wilde. Although the language is easy and gentle, the message is deep and serious. The story reflects human behavior, moral values, and false ideas of friendship. Through ordinary village life, Oscar Wilde shows how selfishness can hide behind kind words. This story remains powerful and unforgettable because it teaches us that true friendship is proved through actions, not speeches. Now, let's examine how Oscar Wilde builds its meaning through the elements of prose. To understand the deeper message of this story, we analyze it using 6 important elements of prose. These elements help us see not just what happens in the story, but why it happens and what it teaches us. Let's explore characters. Little Hans represents pure kindness and innocence. He gives without expecting anything in return, and believes every word spoken by his so-called friend. Hugh the miller represents false friendship. He uses beautiful language, moral speeches, and clever excuses to hide his selfishness. He believes that talking about kindness is more important than actually being kind. The water rat and the linnet frame the story and help Oscar Wilde deliver the moral indirectly. Through them, the writer mocks shallow thinking, and careless attitudes toward friendship. Together, these characters reveal how easily kindness can be exploited. The story is set in a peaceful countryside village, surrounded by gardens, fields, and nature. At first, this calm setting creates a fairy tale atmosphere. However, this peaceful environment sharply contrasts with the cruelty of human behavior. The stormy night near the end of the story reflects danger, fear, and emotional darkness. Nature itself seems to warn us about the tragedy that is about to happen. The plot of The Devoted Friend follows the 5 stages of plot development clearly and powerfully, guiding the reader from a calm beginning to a tragic ending. First, the exposition sets a gentle scene. We are introduced to Little Hans, a poor but cheerful gardener who lives alone beside his small garden. We see his poverty, his love for nature, and his simple, trusting heart. We also meet Hugh the miller, who calls himself Hans's best friend and speaks proudly about friendship and morality. At this stage, everything appears peaceful, almost like a fairy tale. Then the rising action slowly begins to build tension. The miller repeatedly asks Hans for favors: flowers, labor, time, and help, while constantly delaying his promise of giving Hans an old wheelbarrow. With every request, Hans becomes poorer, weaker, and more dependent, while the miller grows more comfortable and confident. The imbalance in their friendship becomes clearer, and the danger quietly increases. Next comes the climax, the most intense moment of the story. On a dark and stormy night, the miller sends Hans to fetch a doctor for his injured son. Despite the heavy rain and strong wind, the miller refuses to lend Hans a lantern, fearing it might get damaged. This moment fully exposes the miller's true nature. His words of friendship collapse, and his selfishness stands naked before us. After the climax, the falling action deepens the tragedy. Hans struggles through the storm, walking blindly in the darkness. He loses his way, stumbles through dangerous paths, and finally disappears into the night. The mood becomes tense, fearful, and hopeless. Finally, the story reaches its resolution. Little Hans is found dead, drowned after losing his way. Instead of showing true sorrow, the miller speaks mainly about his own loss and inconvenience. His lack of real grief confirms the moral of the story, that his friendship was never real. The plot ends quietly, but the message remains powerful and disturbing. The central theme of the story is false friendship. Oscar Wilde shows how selfish people use kind-hearted individuals for personal gain. Another important theme is hypocrisy. The miller speaks about generosity but never practices it. The story also warns us that kindness without awareness can become dangerous. True friendship is based on care, sacrifice, and responsibility, not empty words. The story is told using a third-person narrative, allowing the reader to see events clearly and objectively. Because of this point of view, we are able to recognize the miller's hypocrisy and understand Hans's innocence without confusion. The story within a story technique also adds depth and irony. Oscar Wilde's style is simple yet powerful. He uses a fairy tale structure to deliver a serious moral lesson. Irony and satire play a major role. The miller talks endlessly about friendship, yet behaves cruelly. This contrast makes the message stronger and more memorable. The language is easy to understand, making the lesson clear for all readers. The devoted friend teaches us a timeless lesson. True friendship is shown through actions, not speeches. Oscar Wilde reminds us that kindness must be protected, not abused. When selfishness hides behind morality, it becomes dangerous. This story encourages us to ask ourselves one important question. Are we true friends, or are we only using kind people for our own benefit? Thank you for watching. If this lesson helped you, and subscribe for more simple and meaningful English literature lessons.